You twist the key in your front door, and the cold air knifes in behind you, sharp, metallic, wrong for a place that's supposed to feel safe. Outside, rain needles the pavement and turns parking lots into mirror-black puddles. You drive past a strip mall you've known for years, but the familiar glow is gone. Where the grocery sign used to hum like a lighthouse, there's only darkness, brown paper in the windows, and a store closing banner, snapping in the wind like a warning flag. You feel it in your stomach. This isn't just one bad lease. It's a signal. When grocery stores pull out, it's the canary in the economic coal mine. Jobs evaporate, foot traffic collapses, nearby rents crumple, and whole neighborhoods start paying more for less. On Market Pulse Real Estate, we're counting down the 10 U.S. metros where grocery closures are hitting the hardest in 2025, and why the ripple effects could rewrite local housing and commercial property values. Subscribe now, because the clock starts at 10. And the worst is still ahead. Number 10. Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas. You roll into DFW under a wide, sun-bleached sky, cranes still dotting the horizon like a city mid-sentence. For years, this metro wore a boomtown badge. New rooftops, new lanes, new shopping centers. But even here, the grocery map is starting to show stress fractures. At its modern peak in 2022, DFW's rapid in-migration fueled relentless retail expansion, and newer master-planned suburbs treated grocery anchors as guaranteed winners. Growth was powered by corporate relocations, cheaper land, and a flood of new households. Now the warning lights flicker. Weitzman figures show overall retail occupancy at 95.3% in 2025. But that tightness masks churn. Grocery-anchored centers held 96.4% occupancy, while weaker secondary centers slipped. New retail deliveries leaned heavily, grocery-related, over 80% of new space in 2025 in some tallies, creating localized oversupply pockets. Commercial borrowing costs stayed punishing, with many owners facing refinancing resets at rates 2 to 3 points higher than 2021 terms. Local brokers report tenant improvement budgets up 20 to 30%, squeezing margins for mid-tier grocers. And as discount formats expand, traditional supermarkets report softer basket sizes, with some store-level sales down 5 to 10% year-over-year in older corridors. Source rising payroll costs, higher shrink, and uneven suburban saturation are the pressure points, especially where property taxes climb fast with new assessments. As you leave DFW behind, the market isn't collapsing yet, but it's creaking, and the next cities on this list are already past creaking. Number 9. Denver, Colorado. You drop into Denver with the Front Range cutting a cold silhouette against a pale sky, the kind of backdrop that once screamed stability. This market built a reputation for health, outdoors, and high-income newcomers. But grocery pullbacks are turning desirable into disrupted. Denver's pandemic-era peak came in 2022, when migration and white-collar salaries pushed up commercial rents and justified premium grocery footprints. Growth rode remote work, tech hiring, and a surge of new apartment deliveries. Now the data turns troubling. Safeway's parent, Albertsons, confirmed a wave of store closures across multiple states, with reporting showing 10 locations in Colorado on closure lists tied to underperformance. Local coverage and industry reporting point to multiple Denver area sites affected. Meanwhile, operating costs are spiking. Retail labor costs remain elevated versus 2019, and insurance quotes for commercial property have jumped sharply in the last 2 renewal cycles. Consumer budgets are stretched, food inflation has remained sticky, and shoppers are trading down, hammering mid-market grocers. Store-level shrink remains a persistent drain, forcing more security spending and tighter product lockups that reduce impulse buying. As a result, landlords are seeing longer backfill timelines, with second-generation grocery boxes often sitting 6 to 12 months before a viable tenant emerges. Source: the drivers are clear: higher operating costs, tougher competition from discount and club formats, and uneven urban foot traffic. As you move on from Denver, the unraveling becomes more visible. Because the next metros aren't just pruning stores, they're losing anchors. Number 8. New York City, New York. You step into New York under slate-gray clouds that press down on the avenues, wind tunneling between towers. The city still looks powerful. But on the retail level, it's a battlefield. Thin margins, high rents, and zero forgiveness. Grocery is no exception. NYC's peak confidence era was 2021 to 2022, when reopening optimism and returning foot traffic made expansion feel rational again. High density promised volume, and delivery apps seem to widen demand. But the numbers are sliding into alarming territory. A major urban retail signal. The total number of chain stores across the 5 boroughs fell 1.3% in 2025, marking the 6th decline in 8 years, according to the Center for an Urban Future Analysis reported by AM New York. For grocers, that matters because chain contraction often precedes food access gaps. Commercial rents remain punishing in prime corridors, while wage pressure is relentless. Add to that a consumer who's still paying elevated grocery bills, and you get shrinking basket sizes. Local landlords report more frequent short-term renewals, more kick-out clauses, and higher vacancy risk in marginal blocks. When a grocery closes, the radius impact is brutal. Adjacent small shops see immediate revenue drops, and residential desirability softens block by block. Source: the main factors are rent escalation, labor costs, and persistent theft and safety expenses that spike store operating budgets. As you leave New York, the skyline stays bright, but underneath, the retail foundation is crumbling. Number 7. Baltimore, Maryland. You drive into Baltimore with damp air hanging over row house blocks and wide roads that suddenly feel too empty. This city has carried a long-running food access narrative, and grocery closures don't just inconvenience people here, they redraw daily life. Baltimore's brief rebound peak came around 2021, when redevelopment corridors and new investment promised stability, and some neighborhoods saw fresh retail interest tied to housing rehab and new apartments. Now it's worsening. Investigative local reporting describes grocery shutdowns rising in Baltimore and across Maryland, reshaping routines as residents travel farther for basics and rely more on limited convenience options. The Baltimore Watchdog reported an increase in supermarket and small business closures, highlighting how a single closure can turn an area into a low-access zone overnight. That feeds a vicious cycle: fewer shoppers nearby, less incentive for new tenants, and declining commercial vitality. At the same time, interest rates have driven up borrowing costs for operators, while landlords face higher carrying costs. The result is slower reinvestment, more boarded storefronts, and rising pressure on surrounding property values as neighborhood amenities evaporate. Source key contributors include thin margins in lower-income trade areas, security costs, and aging retail centers that require expensive upgrades. As you pull away from Baltimore, the story feels heavier, because the next cities aren't just losing convenience, they're losing stability. Number 6. Portland, Oregon. You arrive in Portland under a wet graphite sky, streetlights smeared in the rain, storefronts reflecting like broken glass. Portland once sold itself as livable, walkable, and local first. But grocery closures here hit like a gut punch because they expose how fragile urban retail has become. Portland's market confidence peaked around 2021-2022, when in-migration and remote work demand helped justify large-format grocery anchors in redeveloping corridors. New apartments and rising incomes fed the narrative. Now it's deeply troubling. Oregon Live reported that Fred Meyer plans to close its Gateway store in Northeast Portland, a major anchor that residents relied on, part of a larger company pushed to run more efficiently. OPB reported the closure is set for September 2025 and will impact about 250 jobs, a hard number that translates into reduced neighborhood spending power overnight. When an anchor goes dark, the entire shopping center's gravity collapses. Smaller tenants lose spillover traffic, vacancies spread, and landlords face expensive repositioning. In higher-rate financing conditions, that repositioning gets delayed, and the empty box becomes a monument to economic retreat. Source: the biggest forces are elevated operating costs, theft and security pressure, and the high expense of re-tenanting older retail footprints. As you leave Portland behind, the market doesn't just feel soft, it feels like it's unraveling thread by thread. If you're finding this data-driven analysis useful, like the video and comment which city surprises you most. Your engagement helps us continue this research. Number 5. Chicago, Illinois. You enter Chicago with wind ripping off the lake, clouds low and heavy, the city's steel looking colder than usual. Chicago's retail story used to be about scale and density. Millions of customers, endless demand. But grocery closures here have become a symbol of something darker. Chicago's peak optimism flashed in 2021, when reopening promised a return of commuter foot traffic and major retailers still believed urban formats could work at scale. Then, the data turned alarming. Walmart announced the closure of 4 Chicago stores in April 2023, and the shockwaves still echo through 2025 as neighborhoods grapple with access gaps and declining retail confidence. Walmart's own statement framed it as a difficult decision after years of underperformance in the market, and coverage noted the closures would take effect quickly. When a big box grocer exits, replacement isn't automatic, especially in areas already fighting disinvestment. Add downtown weakness. Multiple reports put the Loop's retail vacancy near 30% in recent years, signaling a broader demand problem that impacts grocers near commuter corridors too. A city can't sustain high-cost grocery footprints when daily foot traffic evaporates. Source contributing factors include shrink, security costs, and uneven foot traffic tied to remote work patterns. As you move past Chicago, the narrative shifts from concerning to brutal. Because now, we're entering cities where closures spread like contagion. Number 4. Atlanta, Georgia. You roll into Atlanta beneath thick humidity and a sky that looks bruised, the kind of weather that makes everything feel charged. Atlanta has long been a growth magnet, but grocery access has become a civic crisis, so severe that the city itself has been pushed toward intervention. Atlanta's growth peak surged in 2021-2022, powered by population gains, logistics jobs, and remote work inflows that expanded suburbs and intensified demand for retail services. Now the situation is brutal. The Fern reported that Atlanta is set to open 2 publicly run grocery stores, a move that signals not strength, but emergency response. Government stepping in where private grocers see unacceptable risk or insufficient profit. That's a flashing red light for investors. When grocery becomes a public service, the underlying market is failing. The ripple effects hit housing too. A neighborhood that loses grocery access often sees reduced desirability, weaker rent growth, and harder appraisals for small, multifamily properties. Meanwhile, higher interest rates have made new store builds and retrofits harder to finance. So, closures don't get replaced fast. Source key drivers include profitability gaps in low-access areas, security costs, and lenders tightening underwriting for urban retail projects. As you leave Atlanta behind, the market feels like it's crumbling, because the next metros are losing grocers without any rescue plan waiting. Number 3. Los Angeles, California. You enter Los Angeles through heat, haze, and exhaust, palm trees swaying above a city that looks rich, until you see the boarded windows. LA is massive, diverse, and expensive, and grocery closures here don't happen quietly. They detonate. LA's peak confidence hit in 2022, when high incomes in some corridors and relentless population density made grocery real estate seem bulletproof. Investors priced stores like permanent infrastructure. Now it's devastating. The Los Angeles Times reported that Kroger plans to close 60 stores over the next 18 months, and the company owns major California banners like Ralph's and Food 4 Less, names that shape daily life across the region. Even without a full public list immediately attached, the announcement itself rewires landlord expectations. If a giant is pruning, no location feels untouchable. Closures tighten access in lower-income areas first, pushing households to drive farther and pay more. And for real estate, the math is unforgiving. Once a grocery anchor leaves, adjacent tenants hemorrhage sales, and the center's valuation can drop sharply as vacancy risk spikes and lenders demand higher cap rates. Source: the pressure comes from labor costs, shrink, and the brutal cost structure of operating in California, including taxes and regulation-driven expenses. As you pull away from LA, the collapse feels louder, because the next cities aren't just trimming. They're entering a full retail retreat. Number 2. San Francisco, California. You arrive in San Francisco with cold wind off the bay, fog sliding between buildings like smoke. This city once symbolized maximum demand, high salaries, premium groceries, endless spending. But now, grocery closures feel like a verdict on the urban economy itself. San Francisco's peak narrative was 2022, when new developments and tech optimism still promised a downtown rebound. Retail was expected to follow the workers back in. Instead, the reality is catastrophic. CNN reported that a massive Whole Foods in downtown San Francisco, opened in 2022, closed after about a year, with the company citing worker safety concerns. That single event became a national symbol. If a flagship grocery can't survive, smaller operators don't stand a chance. Commercial stress amplifies it. Cushman and Wakefield data showed San Francisco retail vacancy around 7.1% in Q3 2025, still elevated versus pre-pandemic norms. Remote work drains daytime foot traffic, and when foot traffic collapses, theft risk rises, operating costs spike, and profitability evaporates. The end result is a city where grocery access becomes patchy, and property values near failed retail nodes face renewed downside pressure. Source: the drivers are remote work demand loss, security costs, and high fixed expenses that make even premium neighborhoods vulnerable. As you leave San Francisco, the market feels like it's collapsing in slow motion, because number 1 isn't just a warning. It's the cliff edge. Number 1, Washington, D.C., District of Columbia. You cross into D.C. under a hard, colorless sky. Monuments standing tall while the ground-level economy shakes. For years, the capital felt insulated. Government stability, educated workforce, resilient demand. But in 2025, grocery closures here signal something far worse. Even safe markets are breaking. DC's peak confidence landed in 2021, when reopening and high-income households made urban grocery footprints look like permanent assets. Developers built as if demand would never retreat. Now the situation is apocalyptic, according to Grocery Dives reporting on Kroger's closure footprint. The company has been shuttering locations in major metros, explicitly including Washington, D.C. That's not a random suburb getting trimmed. That's the nation's capital getting cut from the inside. And nationally, Coresight Research projected about 15,000 store closures in 2025, a scale that turns individual grocery closures into a systemic event. When closures become systemic, commercial landlords lose negotiating power. Cap rates expand, refinancing turns hostile, and mixed-use projects anchored by grocery tenants can suddenly look over-leveraged. This is how a retail shock bleeds into real estate valuations, fast and without mercy. Source: Contributing factors include higher financing costs, razor-thin urban grocery margins, and shifting consumer behavior toward discount formats and delivery that erodes in-store volume. As you leave DC behind, the outlook is grim. This isn't a local slump, it's a national unraveling, and the fallout is only beginning. We started at 10 with markets showing early stress, and we ended at 1 where the closures feel like a system-wide alarm. Across these metros, grocery pullbacks aren't isolated decisions. They're signals of shrinking margins, shifting foot traffic, and neighborhoods losing essential infrastructure. The bigger crisis is this. When grocery access collapses, the real estate story changes with it. Commercial strips hollow out, nearby rentals lose appeal, and safe assumptions about demand get crushed. Watch your local anchors, track vacancies, and don't ignore the quiet storefronts. If you want more research-driven breakdowns like this, subscribe to Market Pulse Real Estate, hit like, and comment which metro you want me to analyze next. Until next time, stay sharp, stay data-led, and I'll see you in the next countdown.